What's up? It's 42. I'm doing this on the fly. I'm just driving right now. Miseducation of the Abo Part 4 should be on in a minute. I'm just going to stream the video and give commentary. If you remember from the first part, this is all from one 7-hour program, and it was just so rich in miseducation that I knew just sorting through it would take hours. So I figured, hey, let's just deal with this. Let's just deal with this.
Am I tripping?
Okay, so it sounds like they lost.
Yeah, you do it, cause I have everybody. Again, I can give a mic check every now and then because my mic cut off and I have to refresh the Hangout. So I don't want to have to do it. But let me just say this real quick because the brother was going in, man. Everything they proven out of Africa, with just like I heard a little bit of Unc lecture, and basically at the end he was like, they didn't lie about everything, man. They was right about this one. We can't. If you believe that they can, see, here go the main argument I want y'all to debunk right here. He said, if you believe that they can alter genetics, right?
Now listen to what he just said. This is what I want you to debunk. This is circular reasoning. Base your presentation on disproving something, not the truth.
Make some people smart and change your genetics to make it to where, you know, you don't sweat, shit like that. You know, they doing all that now. You know, even Garfield said, hey man, how can you believe that DNA can determine the baby daddy or can help my homeboy get off this case, but you telling me DNA fake when it comes to proving the out of Africa theory. So now that you debunked it from the bone standpoint and the carbon dating standpoint, what are you?
Part 2, and actually part 1 and part 2 were about the carbon dating, and to some extent about bones and fossils. So from their point of view, he debunked it, but no, I don't see how much doubt was cast if you because basically you can watch those 2 parts, but right now they did something that wasn't fully asked, if you will. Like they did not. You can always say you debunk something because that's cast in doubt, but they did not offer strong evidence against carbon dating because the tactic, same thing that Ken Hoven used, and I show it side by side in part 2. The tactic is to basically take it out of context and create the whole paper tiger fallacy or straw man fallacy, where you're not really challenging it. You're challenging a portion of it that you can criticize. But that portion you're taking out of context. Therefore, your criticism is out of context and it offers nothing. So they did not debunk carbon dating. They debunked an image that they created of carbon dating. That was not the entire story, and I'll go into that in part 2. So right now they're building off of a false premise that they created, which is why this is so steeped in miseducation.
Bumped it from the bone standpoint and the carbon dating standpoint. What do you got to say to like the DNA whole argument about trusting how much DNA can do and what it can't do?
I can understand some kind of that thing.
Well, they're not the same thing.
Right. They're really not the same thing. And the thing is, motherfucker be looking for DNA and ancestral DNA data. If you understand what the word ancestral means, how are you gonna go back to some people who don't exist no more extract the DNA, come back to the contemporary time, and then say, okay, we know.
Now, this is flawed for two reasons. And it's quickly flawed. The first thing he says, well, they're not the same thing. Well, obviously they're not the same thing. But if two things that aren't the same thing tell the story, that's called substantiation. Evidence coming from two different sources saying the same thing. That's called collaborative. And I always say I'm a creature of collaborating evidence, because that's usually where the truth is. And that's the hardest stuff to work with. And the second flaw he makes, I'm gonna let him keep talking, because
come back to the contemporary time and then say, okay, we know who's who. Here's the DNA. Because that's what you said when you say you have ancestral DNA
I mean, yeah, I mean, DNA testing is based on having like prior samples, you know, so what are you proving against when you say, okay, well, this is where your lineage starts?
this is ridiculous. So they're saying, what do you prove against? Where does the lineage start? It doesn't work like that. It shows you who you're related to. It shows you two things: who you're related to, and it shows you where people are on the human family tree. Okay? Now, African Americans are consistently related to Africans. Mostly Central West Africans. After that, you start to see some Madagascar, you start to see some Northwest, you start to see the Nile up to Northeast, South a little bit. It's more sporadic after you get past Central West and Madagascar and the Sahel, which is like Northwest. That's consistent. And another thing that DNA shows about Africans is that they have the older haplogroups, meaning they are earlier in the family tree. Not just earlier, they are the foundation and a lot of the first branches of the family tree.
It's somebody who's never been marked before, like, so what am I then? So I feel like it's all hoaxatory. And from what I understand, DNA is constantly changing and shifting, so it's really not no reading no DNA, man. I don't know about that. I probably need to study more, but that looked like a complete hoax,
So you test a whole bunch of people around the world. You have a database, and you compare someone to who they're related to in that database. Other people do it with different databases. Sometimes they use the same sources. It all starts to create a similar picture, and that looks like a hoax to you. That looks like a hoax to you. The same companies that'll tell you, you don't enter the information. They'll tell you, hey, your cousin live over here, and then you found out your cousin did a test. I've seen that happen. As a gift, I gave that to somebody, to one of my partners. You know what I mean? Because we had a 2-for-1 23andMe. So I got one, he got one. It's found two of his cousins. Well, one cousin, one uncle. That sounds like a hoax to you. He wants to lock that argument in. I mean, in his explanation, but just, at least he said he thinks he needs to study. But hey, if you think you need to study, why are you trying to teach? We already got enough people that don't know what the fuck they're talking about. It's like I said about young Pharaoh. Anybody that thought that 65 million year old pyramid was real wasn't qualified to teach shit how to stink.
That, I probably need to study more, but that looked like a complete hoax, from this side. It definitely is. I was researching on the subject and found out that there have been many scientists, the kind, that ain't on TV, of course, that's been going against these mainstream scientists about the DNA kits, and they were breaking down how, like, that was the biggest scam, one of the biggest scams in genetic testing, like the DNA, the ancestry kits and all that. You know what I'm saying?
I'm a scientist that isn't on TV. What the fuck are you talking about? I think I know what he's getting at, which, again, like, if you're going to say what I think he's getting at isn't telling it isn't looking at the big picture when it comes to DNA. I think what he's talking about is like what AfricanAncestry.com does, where they just give you your haplogroup, but they're really good at mapping it down to a specific group of people. That is whatever. That, the issue I have with that is you're only going to be related to that specific group of people, guarantee. The guaranteed relation is like not strong. Like if you break it down to percentages, it's less than 1%, because you're just following your lineage from one parent or another, like straight through that one parent. And you're not, like if you go through your mother, that means everybody on your father's side isn't included, and everybody on your mother's father's side isn't included. And then going back. So there is some truth to it if you just look at haplogroups. Now, even then, haplogroups tend to take you back to the people you're related to. Not guaranteed at all. It can take you to the other side of the world, but they tend to take you to people that you're related to. The thing is, there's also other types of tests. There's STR tests, S&P tests that give stronger results as to a larger group of people. And those results, not always, tend to coincide. Now, in the way that they don't coincide, I would think they would have a better argument for saying, yo, there's a problem with ancestry tests. We need to sort this out, blah, blah, blah. But the thing is, they can't do that because they want to shoot for the moon and say that the whole damn thing is a hoax. And that's not working because they're not going to be able to provide evidence for that. Meanwhile, I can show you my partner and me. I found two of my relatives on 23andMe. So it bees like that sometimes. Now, it is possible that stuff can get recombined and you can find somebody who they think is a cousin, but they're just like maybe a third or fourth cousin, and they'll say it's a first because just chance. It's just chance that they inherited certain genes that you inherited because you have a strong ancestry, and it ended up by chance being stronger. That does happen too. You can make that mistake. But then that's not what they're saying. They're shooting for the moon.
Ancestry kits and all of that. You know what I'm saying?
They just can't figure out.
Oh shit. But one thing I want to say is this, right? You can't really trace blood, right? Biological blood back to a physical land, right? That's made out of rock and water, trees, all that. What you can do is you can look at
unless it's something else that they're not telling us, which could be the case.
Am I hearing this right? Am I hearing this level of stupidity? Okay, you can trace people to a region if you are related to somebody they dig up in that region. And he's talking about, well, they ain't telling us something. Like, there's a way to actually trace blood to rock anyway. That's kind of how I'm reading it. I just had to chime in there. But you know what I mean? Like, and it's not just that. If you have people that are alive in that region, chances are they didn't move as much as, sometimes people move across the world. But for the most part, if you're related to, let's say, for me, Balanta and Guinea, that might be who I'm related to the most. In Guinea-Bissau. If I'm related to Balanta and Guinea-Bissau, most. I've taken 5 ancestry tests. That's usually who I lean to. If that is the truth, if I'm mostly related to Balanta and Guinea-Bissau, chances are I'm of West African descent. Okay? It's just that simple. Now, that's not to say that the Balanta didn't come from a region. If you look up where they say they came from, and this is ironic as much as I talk about ancient Egypt, they said they came from the Sudan and Egypt. They came from the Nile. You know, it's not one thing. I mean, we do have Brower, but I mean, it's one of those things that would be difficult to investigate, considering who controls most of the, or who controls modern Egypt, period. But, so I don't really, actually I do have other tests that kind of show the migration path of the Balanta, or whoever I may be related to, similar to the Balanta, might not be in the main database that I'm talking about. But in general, I'm always showing up strong for African American. After that, it's West African. After that, it starts to diversify more. You know, I have European relatives, which I already knew about. My ancestry tests show that. I have Native American relatives. My ancestry tests are not as strong as Native American as I expected, but it's there. In the sense that it's as recent as a couple generations, few generations, maybe 3 generations away from having, they say, like 23andMe says a full-blooded, I'm not really sure about that. Full-blooded Native American, I'm not really sure about that. But that's the thing. That's who I'm most related to. Now, if the Aboriginals were to say, hey, these ancestry tests, you just said it take you to America first, well, maybe that's because that's Native American DNA. Well, that works on some levels, it doesn't on others. But like I said, they're all or nothing. And it does sound like the dull-witted sounded fellow who said, well, maybe it's something that they ain't telling us about. Nigga, they ain't telling, that shit ain't possible. You can't be related to no goddamn rock. It's just more common sense. You're related to people who live in a certain area. That usually means you came from that area. Okay? Now, obviously, if you're African American, you're going to be stronger related to African Americans than Africans. So it'll take you to America first. And if you get a really high resolution genetic test, ancestry test, it will take you to the Caribbean, because that's where Africans came first. Most of which, from what I know, were not free, although many free Africans came to this country. They might not have stayed free because shit was turning up, but it is what it is.
Unless it's something else that they're not telling us, which could be the case.
No, it can't.
Well, what they doing, they getting my blood, they seeing its makeup and it's tight, and they got this huge data bank, right? And wherever they find the most consistencies in that blood, they say, well, you from here, 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 here. Think about this, right? Think about what I'm going to say.
That actually made sense. But he's going to try to explain it away. No, you don't get your blood tested.
Multiple places.
You get your spit. No point in cutting yourself when you can spit.
And it just said Africa. It got like a couple of names on there. So they're not really telling you where you come from. They're telling you all the places they finding your blood type consistent.
Another question.
They're not testing blood types. Blood types don't really have much to do with this. Because blood types are older. They go back to different species and ape and stuff. So I really don't study blood type, because blood types are spread out damn near everywhere. And they're not as discerning as genetic evidence. So
I have with the DNA for ancestral
But here's the thing: nobody's correcting them.
Okay. So are you going back 100 years? Are you going back 200 years? You know what I mean? And that's but it gets exponential because it's 12,000 years. I got about 12,000 ancestors. So which one are you talking about?
Nah, if they're testing modern people, then they're not going back any years. They're looking who you are compared to when it comes to modern people. Now, if they're comparing you, like I did a test where I compared, I didn't do it. Tukler on Egypt Search does a test where he compares you to I think it's SPS Smart or STR Smart or something database, and he will then, because he also did it with our Amana family and I think Ramses, the ancient Egyptians that we have STRs on, he'll compare you to them. In that sense, I'm comparing myself genetically to people who lived at a certain time period. Okay? In that sense. Otherwise, you're comparing yourself to modern people.
Years, I got about 12,000 ancestors. So which one are you talking about? So that's why I say it's kind of ridiculous.
I mean, to even go beyond what y'all just said, though, like I said, one, there's no way for them to have ancestral DNA unless they had a fucking time machine. Two,
unless they had a time machine? No. You can just dig up somebody that's been dead. That's why I'm doing this, because I listened to this. Part of the time I listened to it, I was on the plane. And I had listened to it on the bus a day before. I had listened to it partially in the car. And then I'm in the plane listening to it. It's 7 hours. And I'm like, they don't know what they're talking about at all. I mean, consistently don't know what they're talking about. And when they pretend they know what they're talking about, they're spinning things. They're being dishonest. They're miseducating. So I said, you know what? Let me miseducate the miseducation. You know, let me take the miseducation and undo it. Okay? So that's why I'm doing this. And now I'm hearing it again because it's been a while. Like I wanted to do it weekly, but I've been really busy. And I'm hearing it again and I'm thinking, damn, you know, I'm still less than 1 hour in. I'm not even going to go the full 7 hours. I might at the most do 6. Because the last hour is kind of, you know, technical difficulties and whatever. But this is what I'm talking about. You basically got a bunch of people who are in fear of death. So they're spinning and just coming up with reasons to disprove evolution and make things more magical, which makes a heavenly afterlife more savorable. Now, on paper, none of these people will say that they're Christian, but how they behave is like Raw Born would say, is it's disgruntled Christians. Disgruntled Christians.
I said, one, there's no way for them to have ancestral DNA unless they had a fucking time machine. Two, last time I checked, the guy who was supposed to be sitting on the board of the most prestigious DNA data holding company already told y'all only 0.01% of their data information is correct. That's not even a whole.
He's talking about Kittles, and really that's talking about, like I said earlier, just pure haplogroup tests. I think they call it autosomal A. And in that sense, it'll tell you who your mama's all the way back, you know, for a long time because they have a strong database. It'll take your mama all the way back. It'll take your daddy all the way back. Now, with African Americans, a lot of times that'll take you back to Europe, and the motherfuckers won't be satisfied with that. And that's, the thing is, like I said, that's one type of test. And if you're just following your mama, or your daddy back, it's going to be like a very small percentage of who you are. And in that sense, I agree. That's one of the reasons I took 5 tests. I didn't take African ancestry. If I get paid real swell, I might do an African ancestry test because for what it does, it is the best at it. And I would only do it on my mama's side because my dad's side is goes to, actually, I'm kind of curious of where it goes to in Europe. I kind of know, like I kind of know the house and all that. And I'm not really bothered so much about my European ancestry because I know it don't come from slave rape. My great grandfather, I have a picture of him. Actually, it's his great grandfather. He messed around with a woman who was really mixed. So it wasn't like he had some furious, thing with black women. Their kid, who ended up being kind of a blue-eyed Native American mulatto-looking dude, my grandfather, he did prefer sisters. But even though my grandmother on that side was kind of medium complexion, that produced my dad, who kind of looked, like the Currys. And he got with my mom, who was more dark-skinned. So it would go back to my great-grandfather. And I've seen a picture of him. He would pass as white, but he sort of looked like, who's that baseball player? Babe Ruth. Like, amongst white people, he probably would have got criticized for having nigger lips and nigger nose and all that. So that's the straw man argument, where they take a little bit of truth and then they beat on it without giving you full context, because there's other type of genetic tests that give you a broader scope of who you're related to. And if you combine those two, which is actually cheaper than African ancestry, then you're going to have a good idea of who you're related to.
Up there, data information is correct. That's not even a whole fucking number. Think about that shit. Points.
Hey, you're right. I just want to say this real quick. And this is just for perspective, all right? Like I said, and I said it earlier, and I'm gonna keep banging this, and I'm gonna keep reminding y'all of this. And y'all might get tired of hearing it, but I'm gonna wait on somebody to come and tell me it's wrong.
He's saying this right? Because of the fear of death.
Even when it comes,
it
to
really comes down to that
DNA argument. Okay. When they first of all, you must understand they've already determined that out of Africa is correct. So you must understand that Africa is the standard, period, based on their assumption.
It's not based on an assumption, because again, he's going to take this to his straw man argument with carbon dating. The out of Africa thing was a slam dunk way back when I think it was Time Magazine. Time Magazine put a black Adam and Eve on the cover. The reason why they did this is because they had traced autosomal DNA, the same autosomal DNA they were talking about, where you go back to your mama, daddy, the mitochondrial and the Y DNA. They had traced that back to Africans who had the stuff now. I'm talking A0, they didn't have A00 then, and L0, the oldest haplogroups. Has nothing to do with carbon dating. So the dude don't know what he's talking about. He is speaking the miseducation of the ABO.
That Africa is the standard, period, based on their assumption. Follow me here.
No. Based on the assumption.
Out of Africa is the standard.
Don't listen to these people. They are full of shit. They are liars. There's archaeology also backs it up.
By way of the out of Africa assumption.
Not an assumption. Assumption is not based on a whole bunch of collaborating knowledge.
Now, the bones that they find there, they determine their age. They place them in a specific place in the timeline.
Wrong. See, I can do this while I'm driving. I'm literally changing lanes in traffic right now. And the reason why I can do this is because when I listen to this, I should have called in. I really should have, but I wasn't listening to it live. I'm like, this is stupid stuff, man. That's not what happens. They don't know the age of haplogroups. Those are estimations. They know which ones are older and younger because they follow a numerical pattern. If you break it down like that, you can tell which ones are older and younger because they grow from each other. Everything's in line coming out of A00, L0. Everything's coming out of that. You know, when they put these other letters on it and say that this was an Asian haplogroup, a lot of times them haplogroups really came out of Africa. They just blew up when they went elsewhere because there wasn't as much competition. But anyhow, when they put those other letters and stuff, it ain't because nothing magical happened to them. It's the same goddamn lineage. It's all one lineage sprouting out. It's one family tree. I would even go as far as to say, and I actually did it in another video, that the stuff about people breeding with Neanderthal, let me be specific, Homo sapien breeding with the Neanderthal is a false positive. Didn't happen. Okay? So it's one human Homo sapien, check that. One Homo sapien family tree. And actually, it's one human family tree too. You know, maybe different hominids that are similar to humans. Once you get to humans, they might actually, I'll change that because it's one Homo sapien family tree. But even then, early Homo sapiens were surrounded and probably did breed frequently with humans that weren't Homo sapiens. But modern Homo sapiens, as we know them from those haplogroups, one family tree.
They placed them in a specific place in the timeline. Follow me. They placed those bones in the timeline by radiometric dating.
No, they don't. No, they don't. No, they don't. It's the other way around. They date the bones by radiometric dating, and then they say, okay, according to this, if we can also get a haplogroup from someone who's deceased in the ancient past, then we can kind of better understand the age of haplogroups. The age of haplogroups are very loose estimates. That is not as strong as carbon dating, because carbon dating, you have different forms. You can compare it to the strata. That is stronger evidence than haplogroups. Haplogroups, however, to some extent, substantiate carbon dating. Okay? Because you already know which ones are really old. Like, if we were to test somebody with A00 and it's a really old branch of A0, because you can have a recent branch of A0, you know, because you got people with A0 now. If you were to test a really old branch of A0 in a person who's deceased, okay, you would expect it to be older, but it doesn't necessarily work that way, because these branches can keep going, and somebody could pass away. You know, let's say you test somebody that's 5,000 years old. So what they'll do is they'll already have the estimate based on carbon dating, right? So they carbon date the stones. And let's say they find a haplogroup that they've already mapped out as being younger, and they find it in an old, something that's dated older. Then they'll move the haplogroup back or forward. But the thing is, that doesn't happen. You do not find really old remains in the Americas anyway. That's his fantasy. And that's why he's doing the whole paper tiger thing to go along with it. I always say paper tiger. It's interchangeable. He's just creating that false image. And I covered that in video 2. And where it comes from.
Radiometric dating. The assumption that they know is an assumption, and it is 100% set there to tell the story. This is a whole movie given to us as history.
Now, here's the thing, though. We've actually tested more ancient Europeans than ancient Africans. Part of that is because Europe has more resources to do it. They're more ethnocentric in the sense that if you've got a lot of money, a person classified as white is more likely to put money into, I want to discover the um, the origin of the Caucasian race, which is dumb. But anyhow, they're more likely to put money into something like that. When it comes to Africa, it's been like people are estimated 10,000 years old in South Africa. There have been Kenyans around that time period. There's been a few ancient Egyptians. There was Abu Sir, which was like a block of ancient Egyptians. There's been more ancient Egyptians, but a lot of times they only test like one thing. And that stuff is too selective. There's some serious race bias in that. With Native Americans, it's been Naya and Kennewick Man. They were estimated like in the teen thousands. So, to be realer than real, that's basically, they're not really testing ancient Africans and saying, hey, carbon dating 74,000 years ago, and all that. Like, there's no, because a lot of them are fossilized. I'm pretty sure Lucy is a fossil. That's millions of years old. So they're fossilized if you're going to talk about ancient Homo sapien hominids. And the one that were found in, I think they found bones in ancient, or I want to say ancient, like 300,000 year old remains in Morocco. Oldest Homo sapien remains, or thought to be possibly Homo sapien. There's no genetic test on those. There's no genetic test on Lucy. Not Lucy, Lucia. I think that's how you pronounce it. Who's the Native American that has African features, like when they do recreations on Lucia. I don't think there's a test on her. Now, if you're going to doubt genetics, or if genetics was some conspiracy, why wouldn't they already test Lucia and find like a Native American haplogroup and say, see? You know what I mean? But there really hasn't been a test on Lucia. Like, you might have some game. Lucia might be L000 or something like that. I doubt it. But at least you can kind of have, that's a better breed of conspiracy for the abos than this thing that everything is made up as it goes along when it comes to carbon dating. Because that's flawed, and I already went over that.
This is a whole movie given to us as history. So when you say, all right, but how we know they go back to Africa and how many years they go into Africa, all of that is irrelevant if you understand that how they prove the DNA is old as it is based on the assumption of how old the bones.
That is false. See, this is where he's getting it wrong. The DNA is old because it's older branches on the family tree. How old those branches are, as far as like when was the first A0, those are very loose estimates. You have mutation rates, but you also have things that change the mutation rates that that people debate about. Like, it isn't hard science. So you have really more than one set of theories for how old haplogroups are. Now, they're not so loose to the point where anybody would say A0 is only like 30,000 years old. Everybody to a man thinks A0 is at least 150,000 years old. Most people have it at like 250,000. But that's a huge gap, and there's reasons for that gap. They're very complex. I have not mastered them. I don't know them that well to where I can really teach it. But I do understand that there are reasons for why it's spaced out. It's their position on the human family tree. That is why the whole out of Africa thing blew up. Because Africans, not exclusively, there are some exceptions, but the vast majority of the old haplogroups, and really the vast majority of every haplogroup, especially the European, the West Asian, and of course the African, are in Africa.
It is. It's based on the assumption of how old the bones are.
Right. They play with sticks whenever they want.
This is very simple.
And you know why?
They
Because
tell you how old the bones are based on radiometric.
Nope. And he's still on one.
And then
Like, nobody's
they
checking him,
extract the
because
DNA
this is the
and tell you
miseducation
the
of the abo.
story from the timeline that they knowingly lied to you about. They know it. On the record saying they know it's fucked up. And so they know they lied about their time.
No. What Kittle said was not him saying, hey, we're lying about DNA. He was being honest about his specific company and what little they do. And because he was honest, and actually I knew this before, I was just sort of surprised that he was honest about it. But because he was honest, not lying, not deceiving, you know, and actually you should know this anyway. If you had enough knowledge to teach, you would know this. You would know everything I'm saying. You know, might have disagreements on the validity of carbon dating, but you would know that there are other types of DNA tests at least. And you would know that just the autosomal, just the DNA test that he's talking about, that is where you get out of Africa strong. That is when ethnocentric Europeans, classified as white, would pop their collar and say, hey, Adam and Eve came out of Africa, man. The evidence is conclusive. You know what? And this is the thing. You need to know white people better than this. If you knew white people, you would know that they would not go along with out of Africa theory just for some weird conspiracy to take you away from God. Because that's where they're going with it. I mean, that really ends up being, they got a hell of a conspiracy for why white people would do something that's so out of their character.
They're telling a story, and they're using this.
I mean, I get that. But what I'm saying,
no, you don't get it, because you're not checking them.
They're not going back to the beginning of time. You know what I'm saying? They're going back however many generations.
Well,
sometimes they'll tell
see,
you,
what they're doing, look, check this out.
Go this far.
Check this out. Hold on. Let me say this.
And that's
what they're doing.
Because if you go back even 50 years, bro, 50 years ago, I got like 12 progenitors. You know what I mean? So that's ridiculous. You can't, and they not all from St. Louis. You know what I'm saying? Some of them was from Alabama.
This is amazing. Like, you don't know that there are other type of genetic tests. Why are you talking? Why are you wasting your time? Why are you actually trying to teach people? I mean, really, what they should do is either just go hard in the paint in church and, deal with their fear of death like that. But don't try to take your mental issues and place it on other people. It's not going to make you feel better at night. And in fact, anything is going to make you feel worse if you ever wise up to what the fuck you're doing. This is sad. This is really bad.
Not all from St. Louis. You know what I'm saying? Some of them was from Alabama. Some of them, so to say you from here based on this alone is ridiculous unless there's another segment of science that they're not teaching the people. Now,
no, they are teaching the people. I've done it. I can show you the ancestry test.
Definitely, DNA. The DNA shit is a hoax, bro. The whole atom, atomic shit, all of that is a hoax, bro.
Atom, atomic shit?
Yeah, see. Oh, what's good, Shaq? That's Shaq. Yeah, I'm gonna have to refresh the screen here.
They may not have seen it, but he made it very clear. If you go back one generation, you got millions of grandparents.
no, not millions. I think it was 1 million. All right, and they can only tell you about 2 of them. If you go back just 7.
That's if you're talking about a haplogroup, not if you're talking about any other type of ancestry test. You know, and I'm talking like cheap ass 23andMe will give you a whole S&Ps. It'll give you S&Ps, and S&Ps aren't everything, but S&Ps give you way more than 2 relatives out of 1 million. Because, you know, what they're saying is not incorrect with one type of ancestry test. But we're talking 23andMe will give you that and S&Ps, and you can take their S&P evaluation is pretty lousy, but you can take theirs and upload it to I did one to GEDmatch, also did one to GPS. GPS, it works more with those like those tree mix programs to try to calculate where your relatives came from, and that's the one where I said it sort of substantiates the Belanta in me, because after the areas that African Americans typically come from, which is like the Sahel, West Africa, Madagascar, and pretty much that was it. After all that, it's Nile Valley, you know, which is what the Belanta say.
We went on blind faith. So my whole thing
I had to
is,
skip
you brought
forward.
up the
Now that
question, and you said you
Garfield
was
goes in for a minute.
true. He copied the thing word for word. If he made a video just with that alone and copied it and said, "Hey, I'm doing this for such and such," I would say, "Hey, he's right." He changed the date. The lady's video said 1989. He stated the term Pan-Africanism. He said, "Look it up."
I know.
Skip
Amanda Husband.
Well, how can he forgot Sanchez like that? Because of how he is. He's not going around trying to say, "Hey, you know what? All of your master teachers is garbage, and I hate y'all." And what Dane Calloway doing, Bella Sanchez not doing. I don't agree with Bella Sanchez though, but that don't mean we can't have a conversation.
Yeah, Dane Calloway is sick in the
Let
head.
me say something real quick, guys.
You have to do that though, Garfield.
Hey, hold on. Let me say something real quick. Let me
I'm
get
gonna have
one
to
word
skip
in real
forward.
quick, and I'll pass it right.
You know what I'm saying?
Hey,
I'm checking them on it, and they don't want nobody to check them because they dick riders. That's just gonna call it what it is.
Hey,
That's
since
what
we
they mean.
called your name
I'm not.
You know what
Dick
I'm saying?
riders.
It's like, they were trying to figure out.
They talking about hoes?
Because it wasn't
What they talking about?
So I was trying to find a video.
Sorry about the foul language. I know I'm not always the cleanest, but
I want to talk to somebody.
you don't hear me talking about riding dick.
I ain't know nothing about y'all history. He's like, oh no, I don't want to talk to him. I don't talk to him. I'm like,
Damn.
well,
Damn.
you know what I mean? What,
You know what?
I knew who thought of shit because
It sounds like they talking about the whole aspects of Dane Calloway. Well, what the fuck is new? I mean, that dude has some blatant hoosity. Hey, you know, every man has a little bit of a feminine side. It don't mean they homosexual. You know, like if I go into a public bathroom, I get a little dainty. You know, I'm not comfortable around other people's urine.
You know what it is? You know what it is? D-Red is the only one that's going to tell me I'm fucking up. He's going to tell Dane he's fucking up. He's going to tell Sanchez he's fucking up. He's the only one that's going to do that. He's a rare species actually in the community. He's a rare
Them the
species.
people right there that help you grow.
But at the end of the day, though, when I said sucker, I really wasn't meaning it on a personal level. I was just saying that when you challenge him, when I said it, I'm not trying to justify that I call everybody a sucker, by the way. So don't feel like I'm trying to justify it. I'm just telling you in what context that I meant it. I meant it in the context that nobody challenged the dude on the spot. That's why when I came in the hangout, I said, I applaud you, man. I applaud you because you challenged him on the ear in front of everybody. Nobody has been challenging. And even earlier when we was talking, we're Aboriginal power. He just added me to this. He was like, "Oh, I'm not the face behind me." Nobody was backing him. Nobody investigates what the dude says. This is all I'm saying. Let's investigate one thing that he said. Tell me one thing that Brad Calloway said that was true.
Hold on, wait a minute. One thing he said was true is that we all ain't originate from Africa. That's one thing he said that was true. And that's really what the debate is.
He said that, no. Now, bear in mind, that's a very vague comment.
I know.
That is a vague comment, man. I mean, it seemed like every African American that I've ever seen take an ancestry test has at least like 0.5 West Asian or like some Pacific Islander. Like it's across the board, and I think all of that is just Native American. That is not counted among Native American because they're trying to say all Native Americans came from the Bering Strait. But like I said, you see that, and it could also be holdover. You also have holdover lineages in Africa because, like I said, Africa is the base of the family tree. So it could be both, really. So it's a really ridiculous statement. If that's the only thing that Dan Calloway did, shit, anybody could have did that. Nobody argues with that. Yes, chances are, if you're an African American, chances are if you live anywhere on the coast of Africa, you're mixed with something. Unless it's the southwest coast, maybe. But chances are, if you right next to the borderline or something, you're gonna be mixed. So I mean, he ain't really saying nothing. If that's the best you can do.
No. Now, bear in mind, that's a very vague comment.
I know it. That's what I made.
Bro.
Sanchez, I can't disagree with that. How could I disagree with that?
Well,
because
look,
not everybody came from Africa.
Well,
nobody. What is it that to disagree or agree with? Tell me what is it that to disagree? Why would I disagree with that?
Well, listen, here's the thing.
Because of indoctrination. It's just basically a knee-jerk reaction.
If according to evolution, everybody come from Africa, at some point you would disagree when we go back on this timeline. But the thing that I want to bring up with...
Well, sure, yeah. Okay, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about where African Americans came from. So if you've got a portion of your DNA that is Singaporean, even if it's a small portion, which it's likely to be, then either it's a holdover and you're getting that from African relatives because they're basal to a lot of stuff they don't get credit for when you look at them haplogroup maps, and they make it seem like everybody boned out and mutated, when fact is you got all these basal branches of these same haplogroups in smaller number within Africa. They leave Africa and then they blow up because there ain't as many people to compete with on a genetic level when it comes to genetic diversity. Okay? So that's the thing. I mean, and really, this is just, they're kind of jibber-jabbering now, because if that's the best thing that Dan Calloway has said with all them videos.
But the thing that I want to bring up with you, when you talk about pseudoscience, I hear you and Up bring that up a lot. You bring it up. With that, you bring...
We learned in the 5th grade.
Listen,
I just want to know if everybody here accepts that.
Here's the thing.
Hold on. If you don't accept it, but hold on. If you don't accept it, hold on a second.
We do not have laboratory. Bro,
hold on a second.
That's what I'm saying. I don't, hold on. That. Come on with it. And it's we know what
it's a lot of bickering now.
That's why we saying fuck them. We did our own research. We don't want.
Give me 20
science and history is fiance.
Give me 20 seconds.
Hold up, guys. Hold on, guys. Garfield said give him 20 seconds. He'll be back. The thing is this, right? Here's my thing. You go to the doctor, you get a blood test. Cool. No, whether you do or don't, I'm just speaking to the average person. If you do, cool. That's something totally different than you just blindly believe that you come from an ape when you didn't verify nothing. When you go on that blood test, you getting the doctor to verify.
Now, I want to say this. I did a video where I proved that humans come from animals. Other animals, since we are animals. So, he's speaking for himself. I did a video where I proved it. And, like people can say, you got a time machine, how would you prove it? You can do logical proofs. It was a logical proof. It was a hard logical proof. Because what I said, you know what? Even though objectively, white people are albinos. They have mutations that reduce melanin. They're just non-syndemic, which makes them albino. Like, de facto albino. That doesn't mean that they're not, because I put that in front of it. That means that they are and then. Now, you don't hear that much because people classified as white, at least with the people that that understand white supremacy and want to maintain it. And a lot of times that's more people than you would think. It's people who seem different on the surface, but people who are really about that. They understand that they cannot push their agenda as strong if they're weak in the media and they become less popular to the populace. And a lot of times they go for too much. They turn everything into white genocide and people see through the bullshit. They're like, man, nobody's a bigger victim than the goddamn white supremacists. And it's a turnoff for other white people. And they don't really push themselves forward like they want to. But they rarely push themselves back. One way that might push themselves back is if they just came out and be like, hey, you know what? We've got the same mutations that produce albinism everywhere, all throughout the animal kingdom. Now, I noticed this because when I was studying a test on Neanderthal and Denisovan pigment, I noticed that the Neanderthals and the Denisovans had the exact pigment genes as people with dark skin, specifically Yoruba, West Africa, who I'm also related to, who damn near every African American is related to Yoruba. And also, Melanesians. I've talked about this. I did a video on this. And when I noticed this, I said, you know what? They're looking at the same pigment genes that cause albinism when someone's melanated has a syndemic form of albinism, where it's like a random mutation, one gene or two. And if you're dark skinned and you're producing an albino, this albino might not be really that white. They might have ocular albinism, light eyes. They might have skin that can tan. They might have green eyes and kind of a high yellow complexion. They might be really pale. They might have red eyes. They might have blue eyes. They'll come in different forms because there's different genes that do different things. And I had already seen some evidence where these same genes, I only knew of 2, were in animals. And they performed they did the same thing when they mutated in a way it reduced melanin. And a lot of times it would turn something that is red into light pink, or something that is like gray, like a pigeon, into a dove, white. So these were producing white animals. You dig? So I said, okay, what about these other genes? I looked up these genes, and to a gene, they were producing albinism all throughout the animal kingdom. These same genes are in humans. These same genes that they were finding in Neanderthals were all over the animal kingdom. That is a logical proof. Because nobody was putting 2 and 2 together and saying, hey, all of these genes are all throughout the animal kingdom. The reason why they weren't doing that is because, like I said, when it comes to the top level genetics, and more beyond that, when it comes to how the media says things, and you can tell this with what they do with ancient Egyptian genetics. They test like 14 ancient Egyptians. A few things slip out. The stuff that's related to African, blocked on Wikipedia. The one test that's related to ancient Europeans, some of whom had just moved out of Africa and set up shop, gets promoted as ancient Egyptians more related to Europeans and sub-Saharan Africans. No bullshit, it happened. That's controlling the media. Because they control the media like that, you're not going to have them come out and just say, hey, we're albinos. Even though the same genes that are causing albinism in me, you, and that frog over there is causing them to be syndemic albinism, meaning they are wake up in the morning symptoms of albinism, go to bed at night, breed, produce it, a race of albinos, essentially. That's a logical proof. And the reason why it's a logical proof, because logically, if we came from animals, we would have, as people say, you know, X amount, 99, 90, blah, blah, blah percent shared with primates, blah, 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 shared with mice, blah, 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 shared with other mammals, shared with reptiles, all the way till you get to non-animals who have similar cellular structures like plants. We share stuff with DNA with plants. I mean, the reality is we share what we're related to. If we were to go to another planet and see somebody that looks like a Vulcan, everything about them looks human except for they got pointed ears, we'd be more related to a butterfly than that Vulcan. This is how it works. So it's a logical proof. It's not an absolute proof. God damn it, you know, nobody's going to get a time machine. But we got to be logic driven. I'll let it go a little further.
When you go on that blood test, you getting the doctor to verify some shit you already know. Because if I'm going to the doctor for a blood test, my body must be fucking up. Something wrong with my body. Well, okay, let me get my blood test to see what's wrong with me. It ain't like, you know, the doctor already knows something wrong with me. So when he check the blood, he just gonna tell me what it is. I don't have to blindly believe him when I go get my blood test because I went in there because I felt my body fucking up already. So when he give me the test and diagnose me, it ain't like he doing something miraculous. He just telling me what it was through looking at the blood. Now, yes, they got the technology to be able to look at your blood and identify diseases and identify certain things. Hold up, Nova, mute your mic for 1 second. Hey, Nova, mute your mic for 1 second. Damn. Hey, Nova.
Hold on a second.
Yes.
Damn, man, my cable guy is here. I gotta go. He gotta go fix my engine. Happy group A, you have group B, you have C, D, X, Y, all these and T, all these different groups because of sequences over thousands of years. The thing is, we're trying to fathom history and science by not understanding that we as humans barely can live over 100 years old. So when you think about 1,000 years old, you're like, what happened in 1,000 years? So when you look at different people have bridges on their noses because of where they live. You have to look at different things that happen to your face, how you look. If you look at an Asian man right now.
I'm not going along with that. I don't think people have different noses because of where they live. I think people just have different noses.
That Asian era, if you want to call them Asiatic, there's certain facial features they might have that somebody who is in sub-Saharan Africa won't have. It's just certain things that happen over the years, depending on where you live, the climate, the temperature.
I don't know how much of it really. Some of it definitely does deal with the climate and temperature, but to me that is a leap of faith, and I might actually agree with Abos over Garfield right there. We don't know where facial features came from. This whole theory that a narrow nose comes from breathing cold air, I'll say maybe a narrow nose might benefit, so it's more likely to be sexually selected because you're going to survive better. So in that sense, that's true. But the narrow nose is all throughout Africa. You know what I mean? It's just the minority. So, whatever.
Over the years, depending on where you live,
actually, hold on, Dagger.
In the whole human family. So for me, I don't say everybody comes from Africa per se. If you want to say as far as the root, this might get a lot of pro-African people mad, but if you want to use, you can't believe in science and say everybody comes from Africa. Because we're going to say the first man that we found, our first woman, we're going to say is in East Africa or in Central Africa, wherever. But the bottom line is, after years and thousands of years, people change. They're not the same person anymore. Their makeup is different. You got to deal with climate.
Gotcha. Now, here's the thing I want to say. You're wrong. There's tribes in sub-Saharan Africa that got more Asian features on their face than Bruce Lee. Go and look at the Bushman tribe in the desert.
I never said no features. I said there are some features.
No.
I never said all features. There's some features.
But listen, here's my point.
Yeah, that's true. And one thing I've noticed recently, looking at, he called them Bushmen, at the different Khoi groups. And thanks to Corey Holcomb, if you're familiar, I don't even like to call them Khoi, but the Khoi, they don't like being called San. I think that's like Bushman, another name, but they're known as the Khoi San. Some of them in South Africa are even more diverse than just saying they have Asian features. Some of them have like really rare Asian features, and they'll be related to people who will look just like African Americans. Like, I remember I was watching these South African Khoi, right? And they were talking, and for the first 5 minutes, because of how diverse they look, like one of them looked more like a Pacific Islander. One of them looked like one of them old, wise, not Native American, but more like kind of a cross between a Native American and Chinese. Like really odd phenotype. Not your typical Bushman that you see. And another one looked like any old African American. And they all spoke pretty good English. And I'm listening to them. I'm like, this ain't real. This ain't real. They do not look like this. They went out and found some unusual people who are speaking too good English. This is fake. But then I listened to it more, and I had to, admit it was real. They are extremely diverse in that sense. And genetically, a lot of times, because they're isolated in the cut, they'll have more of that holdover ancestry than anybody. But usually it's not Asian. Usually it's European. They'll usually have more African haplogroups. But like I said, it's not just haplogroups when you test people. You also have S&Ps, which will give you percentages that you wouldn't get just from a haplogroup. So let me bring it.
Oh, no. But listen, here's my point. You said it out of your mouth. We're barely living to be 100 years in our lifetime, and we're trying to figure out when you go to Central America, Southern America, man, what we call Hispanics come in all shapes and not have an agenda. You know what I'm saying? Trying to push an agenda. You gotta let the evidence speak. They don't ever talk about the most original theory of evolution, which is a competing theory to the outer African theory. You see what I'm saying? So,
how is evolution a competing theory to the outer Africa theory?
Outer African theory is not a fact. So when they try to tell you that a theory is a fact, the theory is not a fact because they have what is called a scientific fact. You see what I'm saying? So they never teach you. D-Ray, you just said scientific fact. No, it's actually scientific theory. Scientific theory is hold on. A scientific theory is actually a fact. Am I lying? No, it's not. No, it's not. Because let me just read this carefully to everybody. Tested in accordance with the scientific method using a predefined protocol of observation.
I'm kind of skipping forward. I might end it right here because they go back and forth right here and they don't really cover much over the definition of a scientific theory and the definition of a scientific fact. And to be real, I don't get down like that. I don't know. I don't know. I know what a scientific theory is. I'm not familiar with what a scientific fact is, other than that maybe it's something that's proven by experiments over and over a certain amount of time. That's what I would think it is. It's something, because what is a fact other than something that's proven by experiments? You know what I mean? Like everything that you would consider to be a fact is a scientific fact. And evolution is a fact because you can prove evolution by experiments. I did it when I did that little thought experiment. Hey, white people don't like admitting that they albinos because their social engineering game is strong and they understand how that might look. So they're not going to come out and say it, even to the point where they have genes, light version of genes that produce light skin, hair, eyes, freckles, all that in them and in all throughout the animal kingdom. But because they'll get down in science, and a lot of scientists aren't really that hung up on religion, trying to prove not natural selection, intelligent design. They're not trying to prove intelligent design. They're going with where their experiments take them. They're trying to be that dude that gets the Nobel Prize because they discovered something new. They will, if you read through the study, say, hey, this gene HERC2, this gene OCA1, this gene SLC34, this gene blah, 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 tier, whatever. Like, they'll say that these genes are in animals causing albinism. But they ain't just going to come out and put everything together and say that they're albinos. You can do it. I can do it. Nothing's going to, I'm an objectivist. If the facts are there, I'll say it. And if nobody else is saying it, you know me, I'll say it. Okay? So that's what I mean. Like, we can prove it based on logic. Because the people that did the studies, they put it here and there and there. I had to look at a bunch of different articles. It really didn't take that long. Because it's out there that these genes that produce albinism are all throughout the animal kingdom. Well, if they're all throughout the animal kingdom and they're in us, that proves evolution on a logic level. Now you could say, oh, the gods use the same ball of clay, and that's why it's similar. Okay? So I proved it compared to the ball of clay theory. You can have whatever creation theory you want and say it's better. You run a logical proof on that in the same way that I ran one on evolution. And you'll see what I mean. You show me the data on that. It's like I once heard some preachers say, well, scientists say that if you go deep in the earth, it gets hot just like hell. And I'm like, okay. Have you ever seen a demon come out of the ground and slap somebody upside the head? If you're so certain that hell is down there, what evidence do you have? Bring it. You know what I mean? Are you measuring the brimstone activities when you cuss at the ground or something? Like Ghostbusters 2? When they had that slime? A little bit more. These dogs need to shut up.
Theory being there. We talking about the word fact not being there. We know what a fact is. We ain't looking for theories.
I don't think they know what a fact is.
You blew in the face about what they say a theory is. It ain't a fact.
Because you can spin anything.
Oh, that's a fact. Gravity is not, it's a theory. So when you say that
gravity is a theory? I thought gravity was a law, but that's what I mean. Like, to me, how can you not say gravity is a fact if your experiment is pick something up and drop it? Does it go down? Yes. That's a fact. It went down. Something is pulling it down. That's a fact. And he's going to call it a theory because he's a flat earther.
It's something that can be constantly duplicated. I'm a flat earther. I ain't going to get off subject. But I'm going to just say this. You can't reduplicate water holding the shape of a ball suspended in the atmosphere.
Yes, you can. It's called a bubble.
So that's why gravity is a theory. Think about it. They say it's diamond planets. I'm just giving y'all examples dealing with space in the universe, but we're not going to go into flat earth. I don't want to go there. I'm bringing this up to show the difference between a theory and a fact. It's diamond planets are a theory. Water worlds are a theory. Now, in the scientific world, it's factual information to them based upon data analysis and equation. For example, to every sci-fi movie, they can break down the mathematics to the dude hovering above the building or the laser gun. It's an equation for that. Now, the equations don't necessarily have to fit reality, though. And that's why we don't know the difference between theory and fact today. Jack and Bean, think about this. Think about Jack and the Beanstalk. Jack went up the beanstalk. That's a fact. but it's only a fact in mythology. So some facts are only facts within the literature that they're presented in. If we're talking about certain things, then yes, it's going to be fact if we make a scenario for it to be factual in. Yeah, Jack can climb up the beanstalk in storybook land, but if we try to apply them physics and reality, it won't work. This is what separates theories from facts. Because if you just say, for example, about the diamond planet, it's factual that they exist according to the scientific information and data that they wrote out to say, hey, according to the laws of probability, there should be somewhere where there's a diamond planet up there. And not that they actually saw one, is factual information. But in the realm of the equation, anything is factual. Only thing I'm saying, hold on, wait a minute, let me say this. Let me say this. I'm giving y'all the equal amount of time. You're not letting no one finish. Calm down, brother. Let me finish. I'm about to be done. Brother, let me finish and ask you a question. I'm going to conclude on this so he can get the mic because I don't want to take too long. He can't wait to go. So
damn.
You know, okay. The mic, Jay.
I'm going to go and hurry up so y'all can go and go. What I'm going to conclude on with my little spiel is this. A diamond planet ain't a fact because we'll never be able to prove it. It'll only be a fact going by the equations that they give us to support it. But the equations is only supporting